What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, August 2nd, 2016. Getting into the week here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in with your comments and questions. There is now a lot of buzz about this documentary, Hillary's America. And we posted a link to the official teaser trailer, as well as a couple of clips that have made it onto YouTube, including a section that draws parallels between Hillary Clinton and Evita Peron, for those of you old enough to remember that dictatorship. And it looks like it's going to be a good movie. I can't see it. It isn't playing anywhere around here. But right now, it is the top grossing documentary film. People are talking about it all over the place. And so if it's playing near where you are, you probably want to get on out and see it. Now, despite the name Hillary's America, from what I can tell from the little clips I've seen, this is also a condemnation of the Democratic Party as a whole. And it fits in with something that I predicted was going to happen. Once the Democratic Party committed to Hillary Clinton, by hook or by crook, which we know they did rig it, they rigged the primaries, their future is now tangled up with her. When she goes down for corruption, espionage, RICO, whatever, it's going to destroy the Democratic Party as a whole, the way Richard Nixon brought down the GOP. And it took them a decade or more to recover from that. And so now we're going to start seeing, the attacks to bring down Hillary and to shackle her behavior to the Democratic Party as a whole, which is going to be easy to do after what Debbie Wasserman Schultz did to Bernie Sanders. Now, everybody's openly talking about election fraud, and even Donald Trump came on out and said that November is likely to be rigged, and he's absolutely accurate about that. The corporate media's attitude is we're going to make fun of Donald Trump for daring to impugn that our election systems are in any way compromised, and hope that the American people forget about it by November, which is not going to happen. We're less than 100 days away from that election, and the independent media is going to be reminding everybody. Now, there's another story that came out of Activist Post, where Bev Harris over at blackboxvoting.org has discovered that all of a sudden the electronic voting machines are handing the vote counts as fractions, as floating point numbers. And it allows for a more subtle biasing of the election results without the embarrassment of negative vote counts. Now, there's no legitimate reason for votes to be handled as floating point numbers. Floating point numbers take up much more memory space. They slow down the processor. Votes are, by their nature, integers, whole numbers, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 votes. There's no such thing as 2.5 votes. So we're already seeing preparations for massive theft from the American voter this November. And remember, we've had Stanford and one other study come on out showing that where easily hackable electronic voting machines were being used, Hillary Clinton got a boost of 9%, sometimes even more than that, over the exit polls. Any discrepancy more than 2% between official results and the official results is considered evidence of election fraud, both by the State Department and the United Nations. Now, there's been another video surface of one of Hillary Clinton's supporters behaving very, very badly. I mean, the media is always trying to say, oh, it's Bernie Sanders people, they're violent, they're disrespectful, it's Donald Trump supporters. But we keep getting these videos of Hillary supporters. In this one, this Hillary supporter physically attacks Trump supporters, including an old man. And by the way, this is a violation of Title 18, Section 594, which deals with intimidation and coercion of voters. It is a crime punishable by a year in prison. But one of the most annoying things about Hillary's backers is that they, like Hillary herself, feel that the law should not apply to them because they serve a noble purpose. They're hearing a higher calling from the Empress, and therefore that makes it okay for them to behave in a very disreputable, disgraceful, unethical, immoral manner. They think it's their divine right. Now, as you know, the corporate media is still out there trying to draw some kind of a link between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to turn Trump into the evil Russian plotter who will destroy America on behalf of Russia. They can't find anything. This is condemnation by overwhelming smear. And as it turns out, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, was head of a company that received $35 million from a Putin-connected Russian government fund while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and Podesta failed to fully disclose on this relationship as required by law. So Hillary's the one with the Russian connection. Not just Podesta, but there's that tech city near Moscow, the technology transfer, and there's the Uranium One deal. Hillary's doing a lot of projecting. She's taking all the crimes she's committed and saying, Donald did it, Donald did it, Donald did it. Now, the corporate media is out there determined to prove once and for all they are in control of the minds of America. The New York Times is out there leading with this Russia hack conspiracy. Oh, the Russians broke into the Democratic National Committee, those dastardly Russians. In the next to the last paragraph, all the way at the bottom, the New York Times admits there isn't any evidence that this went on. But the New York Times is counting on people to read the headline and maybe the first paragraph and skip the rest. So they bury it down at the bottom so they can't be sued. Meanwhile, the New York Times is also taking the editorial position of how dare Trump refuse to demonize Russia. Everybody wants to demonize Russia today. How dare Donald Trump refuse to go along with this demonize Russia agenda. And Trump's already out there saying he doesn't want a new Cold War, which is true of the American people. He wants to go back to being friends with Russia and China and trade with them. Peace through commerce. It's a great idea. And the New York Times and the corporate media are trying to turn Russia into our enemy again and link Donald Trump to our enemy to hand the White House to Hillary Clinton. And we all see what's going on. We saw it. They did the same stunt during LBJ's campaign for re-election. Reagan used it. Russia's the bad guy. I'm the best person able to deal with Russia. Well, in Hillary's case, that's true. She's made a lot of deals with Russia, such as the Uranium One deal. Now, Donald Trump came on out and said Hillary Clinton is linked to ISIS, and the media goes crazy. The same media that's pushing this Trump-Putin link as if it's absolute gospel truth is out there enraged. How dare Donald Trump say that Hillary Clinton is linked to ISIS? And they go on down and they find this one bit of proof that's rather weak, which is this connection to this French company's contribution to the Clinton Foundation. And they totally ignore the latest WikiLeaks email dump, confirming that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was supplying arms to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. The media bias has never been more obvious. Let's take a phone call. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there?
I'm there.
Go. Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind today?
Well, media seem to jump on the idea that Trump is a draft dodger. Could you enlighten us on any of this information to be true or not true, or what?
I hadn't even heard that one yet, but I imagine they're just going to be throwing. It's the pasta approach. They're going to throw as much pasta against the wall and see if any of it's going to stick.
Right. That's what I figured. All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We'll look into that. I mean, they've come up with some incredible fantasies. Remember that bogus lawsuit was filed in I think it was originally in California, where this plaintiff claimed she'd been raped as 13 years of age by Donald Trump on Jeff Epstein's island, full of sizzle. And the case got thrown out of court because it turned out the plaintiff doesn't actually exist. The address on the legal filing was a boarded-up house. the phone number for the plaintiff was disconnected, and before it was disconnected, it belonged to a dentist. It was a completely made-up thing, but they wanted to generate headlines with it. Doesn't matter if the case gets thrown out of court, and I understand they refiled it in New Jersey. All right, moving along here. I mean, we know Hillary is going to lie about everything. In fact, some of the lies are getting so far out there, you know, even the corporate media that's trying to support her is saying, are you kidding? She had that whopper on 60 Minutes where she claimed she didn't know the Democratic National Committee was trying to rig the primaries for her. And 60 Minutes, they couldn't even go with that one. They cut it out of the broadcast version. Now, Pat Cadell, who's a veteran political analyst, is saying, predicting, the corporate media is going to go into overdrive to protect Hillary Clinton from all these revelations coming out, including John Podesta getting millions from a Russian government technology initiative. And basically goes on to say the Clinton Foundation is literally a RICO case waiting to happen. Now, it almost did happen down in Florida. Larry Klayman, who helped found Judicial Watch, had an ironclad RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. He had the misfortune of having the case assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who threw it out of court, at which point the FBI stepped in, took over that investigation. So any minute we're going to have James Comey come on out and say, well, yes, the Clinton Foundation is a huge scam, but we found no evidence Hillary Clinton intended to do any wrong, so we're not going to recommend charges. Now, the corporate media is out there with polls saying Hillary's pulling back into the lead over Donald Trump. She's doing great. She's doing wonderful. Ignoring the fact Reuters got caught changing their polls. And now all the corporate media outlets have said, yes, we have changed our polling methodology, and it's only a coincidence that it boosts Hillary by 7-8%. According to this story over in Investment Watch blog, polls of independent voters are showing Hillary Clinton's speech was a flop. It didn't move them at all. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton's lies. Now she's lying about lying to the FBI on her private email server. And this one was so far out there, even the corporate media had to step up and say, this is nonsense. Hillary is now out there saying that she has everything she told the public and the Congress about her email server was truthful, and she claims the FBI backed her up. No, James Comey did not. Hillary is basically counting that her supporters didn't actually watch FBI Director Comey on TV. It's a bluff. It's a gigantic, gigantic bluff. And we're seeing articles like in PolitiFact that tear it all apart. And apparently on the July 31st edition of Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace played the video montage showing what Hillary said and FBI Director Comey said. And Hillary said, well, that's not what I remember Comey saying. She's trying to imply that Fox News made up this video. And she came on out and said, Director Comey said my answers were truthful, and that's what I've said is consistent with what I've told the American people. Blah, 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 blah. Liar, liar, pantsuit on fire. Another article on the same line. This is from Fox News. Clinton fact-checked on truthful claim and email scandal. They awarded her 4 Pinocchios, which I think is the top of the scale. And what really makes this ironic, out in Los Angeles, there's a former county sheriff, Lee Baca, is going on trial for lying to the FBI during an investigation into corruption. Why isn't Hillary Clinton being prosecuted for lying to the FBI when James Comey has come on out and said, yes, she did? Another article on the same thing. This is from Investors.com. Clinton takes lying to a whole new level. Nobody is buying this, and it's just tarnishing her trust. It's making her trust problem worse than it was before. And then we have the signs of the emerging dictator. This came from WorldNet Daily, where Hillary rejects the FBI's email findings. I reject them. That's it. End of story. So now we all have a new defense. When the FBI comes in to arrest us for a crime, we'll simply say, we reject your findings. That's our get out of jail free. And we didn't mean to do harm, so you can't arrest us anymore. I mean, this is a major denial. This is Hillary Clinton's version of Bill Clinton's "it depends on what the meaning of the word is." And it really is absurd. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Art from Off the Grid. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Before we get to what I called in about in response to the previous caller asking about Trump and service, whatever, during the Vietnam era, this was reported on today, during the Vietnam era, Donald Trump did sign up for the Army 3 separate times, and he was denied each time. They did not say why he was denied, just that he was denied. And that's why he was never a part of the draft.
Okay, that would make sense. You know, I went through the draft.
Not like he didn't try.
Okay, well, documentation on that would be very, very useful now. But at this point, well, anytime the establishment media or Hillary say something about Donald Trump, I'm just not paying attention anymore because we've been lied to so much already. I'm not going to even waste my time double checking what they say. Just turn over the egg timer and move on.
This was a Republican talk show host,
yes,
conservative talk show host, who actually reported on this earlier today. So, and this is a Trump supporter, by the way.
Yes.
And they, according to them, he did apply 3 times to the Army during the Vietnam era, but he was denied each time. So it's not like he didn't try. But here's my thing. Mr. Khan can get up there and he can boo-hoo-hoo, whine, cry, and complain all day long about Mr. Trump, you didn't even serve. Mr. Trump, you don't know what sacrifice is. Well, let's ask the question. Did Barack Obama serve in the military? No. Did he ever sacrifice anything? No. He was a freaking community organizer. Only job the man ever had was when he was 17 years old and he worked at a Baskin-Robbins in Honolulu. What about Bill Clinton? Did Bill Clinton ever serve in the military?
Nope.
No. In fact, when he was in college, he wrote a very nasty letter toward the military. But yet, he got elected. What about George Bush Jr.? Yeah, he actually served in the National Guard. What about George Bush Sr.? Yeah, he was actually forced to jump out of an airplane to save his life during World War II. Let's go back and without going through the whole list, let's look at all previous presidents, and you tell me how many Democrats versus how many Republicans versus how many of other parties from back in the day served in the military, and you will find very few Democrats.
I wonder if Hillary, that documentary Hillary's America, mentions that. We don't need to go back in history. What we do need to do is look at, as you say, our current generation of politicians. None of them served in combat. That's why they're so cavalier with throwing away the lives of other people's children. They don't have an experience with it. When Dwight D. Eisenhower came back from World War II and became president, he was one of the most anti-war presidents we ever had, including his attacks on the military-industrial complex, because he had seen war up close and personal.
That's why that's why this argument is completely without foundation and all. And he wants to talk about sacrifice. Okay, I grieve for Mr. Khan, and my sympathies goes out to his loss. But when you talk about sacrifice, I grew up in a family. I'm ex-military. I'm a vet myself. So, I know about sacrifice and putting it out there in the wood, and going that extra mile when, and all of that, even though I never got any awards or anything like that. But I didn't do it for the awards. I did it because I felt obligated. It was my duty. But here's the thing, too, when it comes to sacrifice. I grew up in a family. My mom owned a business. My dad owned a business. And together they owned a business. So I grew up in 3 different family businesses. And I know how much sacrifice any business owner must make for their employees. Now, granted, my mom and dad didn't
employ... Okay, Art, we got to take a break. Art, we got to take a 3-minute break. Stay on the line. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to Art off the grid here, apparently the latest thing coming out from Hillary Clinton's supporters is that it's her opinion that FBI Director Comey said she was being truthful, and therefore it's legitimate for her to come on out and say that because that's her honest opinion. They're only making it worse. This could even be Hillary's shark moment. All right, let's get back to Art off the grid, and we're talking about how Donald Trump did try and enlist in the Army during Vietnam. I did a little search on the web, and apparently he was rejected for medical reasons. Either height or weight.
Yeah.
Ooh, ow. Ouch. Okay, anyway, so what else did you want to share with us?
Yeah, and that was reported on earlier today. That's how I learned about it. Anyway, as I was saying, as far as this sacrifice thing goes, I grew up with my mom and dad together owning 3 businesses. So I saw firsthand the sacrifices that any business owner must make on behalf of their employees. Now, granted, during the 60s and 70s, as I was a child and a teenager, they only employed maybe 100 people, but still that was not a bad family, bad size, for family business.
No.
Back in those days. And so I know the sacrifices they made for that 100 people. I can only try to imagine the sacrifices Mr. Trump has had to make over all of these decades. For how many people does he employ?
Quite a few, and he's already creating jobs, and he's not yet president from all these online shills that are being hired to badmouth him on the Internet. Anyway, Art, the reality is nothing worth doing is going to be done without involving sacrifice. And you can talk to all of the various independent media people. We're not getting rich out here. The big money goes to the paid liars over at the corporate media. Art, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Brian in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Michael. Long time no talk. I've been a listener to you for years. My big question to you is, how do you feel about this situation that's going on in Syria right now, where the latest is that a helicopter, it doesn't say who, of course, is flying the helicopter or which group, has supposedly dropped some chlorine canisters on the village of Sarakeb in Idlib province, I do believe it's called, in Syria.
Yeah, it's near where it's near where the Russian helicopter got shot down, and they're emphasizing that the chlorine gas targeted women and children, which frankly makes it sound like another one of these endless U.S. false flag attempts to demonize Assad and Russia. And again, what should be there and isn't is a motive for either Russia or Syria to be using gas on civilian women and children. This is obviously another made-up story by the U.S. government.
You are so right. And what we're seeing again is, wasn't it over 2 years ago that they tried the same thing with Bashar al-Assad, gassing his people near Damascus?
Yes.
And it forced the issue with the Russians helping the Syrians to get rid of all of their chemical weapons stockpiles. So the question is, if Syria doesn't have the chemical weapons stockpiles, hopefully the Canadian and American people can put 2 and 2 together and say, hey, look, the Syrians don't have these gas bombs, so who has them? Well, duh. I mean, obviously, we're looking at an American false flag again, Mike, and you are so right.
Absolutely, no question. Here's what everybody needs to be thinking right now. We are living with a government and politicians who have been lying to us continuously for decades. By what insane rationale would you expect them to all of a sudden start to tell you the truth? As long as you keep that in mind, you're going to be on good ground.
Yes, you are so right, but it's obvious they are doing this now because we know what's happening in Aleppo. Because the so-called rebels, which we know are U.S. paid mercenaries, are on the run. They're being killed. Most of them are having to surrender and lay down their weapons. And like you said last week's show, it looks like sometime this week, hopefully within the next few days, we'll see Aleppo surrender properly to the Syrian army, and the war in Syria will basically be over for the Americans.
Yeah, so, and it's our new version of Vietnam, and it's a serious hiccup in this plan to regime change all the Middle East. We got to let you go here, Brian. We got another commercial break coming on up, and we're going to be talking about Syria because it even gets more Twilight Zone than the chlorine gas. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, I think over in Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters, they're in a panic because when Hillary came on out and said that FBI Director James Comey agreed with her that she had been truthful and honest with the American people in the Congress, and Comey is on video being exactly the opposite, it's a firestorm. And it gets right to the heart of that trustworthiness issue, which is Hillary Clinton's biggest liability with voters. And so now the latest spin coming out of Hillary's campaign is that she didn't mean to mislead anybody with her various and obviously different email explanations. You know, she didn't mean to mislead. But, you know, after that thump on the head, she gets a little confused and addled, and that's really all it is. And, you know, if you're pointing out how she seems to be saying different things at different times, you're just picking on this poor, injured old woman here. But, you know, she'll be perfectly fine by next January when she moves into that building over on Pennsylvania Avenue. She used to live there, and she forgets the name of it right now, but that tourist attraction thingy. Have you noticed how more and more of the defense of Hillary Clinton amounts to portraying her as somebody not suited to be president? She's confused. She got mistakes. She's careless. She's reckless. We don't need that in the Oval Office. I don't want careless and reckless and negligent and confused holding the keys to the nuclear arsenal. I didn't mean to blow up London. Anyway, over at WikiLeaks, they now have a searchable database of 23,000 Hillary Clinton emails marked C4 classified. 23,000. And that means that Hillary Clinton was lying, and it means FBI Director James Comey lied when he said that the FBI found only 110 classified emails. They're both lying because they're in trouble. Because this scandal, when it breaks, is going to unwind all the way back to that Clinton Foundation, drug money laundering, and it's going to expose the rotted heart of the American government to the American people. Now, yet another revelation coming out of WikiLeaks is further confirmation of the gun running to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, which is a solid foundation on which to say Hillary Clinton has links to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And the corporate media is out there saying, oh, this is horrible, horrible, horrible. How dare you impugn the next president of the United States of America? Corporate media gets really one-sided on the impugn. It's okay to call Pat Smith a liar. It's okay to call Donald Trump a Russian stooge, but don't you dare mention that Hillary had anything to do with ISIS, despite her own emails saying that she did. One of the emails that came on out reveals that the effort by Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi to create a gold-backed currency for the region was among the key reasons for killing Gaddafi and destroying Libya. It was that gold-backed dinar that this was all about. Those of you serving in the military, it's an ugly, ugly truth you're going to have to face up to. When you go into battle in foreign lands, you are not there to defend America or the Constitution or the American way of life. You are there to make money for the bankers. That's what your blood is being sold for, bankers' gold. Now, there's another article over in Global Research up in Canada, Barbarians at the Gate, and they're talking about how WikiLeaks has done the world a service, blowing the lid off the fact that the Democratic National Committee, which by their own rules is supposed to remain impartial during the primary season, was doing everything they could to tilt the field toward Hillary Clinton. And we all know it. We all know it. There was cheating going on. What is the FBI doing? Well, they're going to investigate the source of the DNC leaks. And yeah, but they can't be bothered with all these allegations of election fraud. I mean, everybody does it. But we're going to get those who leaked our secrets out. That's really what it is. The entire system is trying to preserve itself, to protect itself. They're very, very angry that the American people are getting wise to them. They're not going to punish the criminals. Their job is to protect the guilty. They're going to punish the innocent, the whistleblowers. And they're out there trying to scream that Donald Trump is a threat to national security. No, Hillary was. And I re-put out that story, Hillary the spy, because it's germane, knowing that there were far more classified documents on her weak private email server, raises that question. Was Hillary Clinton repeating the 1996 Chinagate scandal, in which then-President Bill Clinton authorized the sale to China of highly sensitive technology with military applications, and Chinese money was funneled into his re-election campaign? And that may become a current scandal again now that Englap Singh has been arrested inside the U.S. on an unrelated charge, because it gives congressional investigators a chance to go ask him some pointed questions. Now, as you know, Hillary was bashing on Pat Smith, the mother of one of the Benghazi victims, for daring to challenge the official story that this was all about, this video. And apparently, Hillary is trying to defuse that situation of having attacked a Gold Star mother herself personally by saying, well, the problem is that all of these families of all these people who died, they all have bad memories. They all have bad memories. My memory is perfect despite that concussion, but they all have bad memories. And that prompted Charles Wood, the father of Tyrone Woods, who died in the Benghazi conflagration, basically saying Hillary is a liar, or she has a bad memory from the head injury. It's not the families who have the bad memory, because all of their stories about being told it was a terrorist attack line up. The only non-aligned version is the one that's coming from Hillary. And we now know from some of these leaked emails that Judicial Watch got on out that, yes, in point of fact, they knew it was a coordinated terrorist attack, and they decided to frame it on this non-existent movie based on a trailer hacked out of another movie that was dumped on YouTube. When Benghazi went down, the first thing they thought about was how to spin it, how to make it look good. They weren't thinking about the victims. They weren't thinking about the families. They were thinking about how we can turn this to our political advantage. That's the way they think. So, now let's get on back to the story of Khizr Khan. This is the gentleman who came on out and bashed Donald Trump, saying that Trump's policies were an insult to his son, who died fighting for the United States of America. Well, if you're looking for somebody to blame for your son's death, you might want to look at Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, who were basically calling the shots during the war that your son died in. Donald Trump had nothing to do with that. But Khan was out there bashing Donald Trump, and he was playing right into the Democratic narrative of open, free immigration. And as it turns out, Khan, along with being connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, has a law firm that specialized in Muslim immigration. He was making money off of the Muslims coming to the United States and seeking citizenship. And as of today, they've taken that law firm website off the net. They don't want anybody pointing to it anymore and saying that this guy did have a provable financial motive to be attacking Donald Trump. Now, while the FBI may be deciding that it's far more important to find out who leaked those DNC emails and not even bother with all this vote fraud stuff, what a nightmare that would be, the Institute for American Democracy and Election Integrity has filed a racketeering lawsuit over the election fraud during the primaries that cost Bernie Sanders the nomination. At this point, everybody knows this primary was crooked. Hillary is not a legal, legitimate candidate. She shouldn't be. And this is one of, I've actually lost count, I think 13, 14 different lawsuits attempting to block certification of elections and find some redress. I love that class action lawsuit that's being filed on behalf of all the Bernie Sanders donors, demanding the DNC reimburse them for their donations, since the DNC saw it fit to sabotage their candidate. Now, at the heart of all of this cheating are these notoriously easy-to-hack electronic voting machines. And again, if you have not done so, please visit blackboxvoting.org. If you have not seen it, you need to hunt down this HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. We've had it on the front page of our website several times. You can find it on YouTube. You need to watch that to see just how out of control the problem is. And the rest of the world understands this. Europe has just rejected all digital voting machines, saying that none of them out there meet the standards they demand for accuracy, transparency, and verifiability of the elections. They're gone. Europe doesn't have them anymore, which is really going to annoy those people pushing for a second Brexit referendum. Now, according to Republican National Committee Chair Reince Priebus, 90% of Republicans are now supporting Donald Trump, which sounds pretty legit because I think at some point Ted Cruz's supporters had to finally acknowledge he wasn't constitutionally eligible to serve as president. He was thrown into the mix to try and derail Donald Trump. That failed. And now the GOP is realizing they have a real shot at taking the White House. Now, there are a lot of Republicans, the neocons, who are fully on board with Hillary Clinton. They're being seen as traitors to their own party. But all the war hawks and all the money junkies, they're all for Hillary. Bloomberg is pushing for Hillary, and because they know she will take the shackles off of Wall Street and they'll be able to reap trillions and trillions in ill-gotten gains. This is going to be an historic election season. It already is. There'll be college classes teaching about this somewhere in the future. And we're seeing more and more articles coming on up saying the issues are really a lot larger than Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. There's a story over here in reader-supported news about how the establishment is trying to shove Hillary Clinton down our throats and up our nose so that business will go back to usual because they're getting rich off of business as usual. And their attitude is, oh, Donald Trump, he's a joke, and Bernie Sanders was a flash in the pan. No, they're reflective of a dynamic change in the American voter who is sick and tired of politics as usual, who is sick and tired of business as usual, who have felt the pain of Wall Street's unrestricted plundering of the American nation. Now, back in mid-July, before the conventions, a Gallup poll found 82% of Americans think the nation is on the wrong track. And that's what this is really all about. Pulling this nation back from the abyss, pulling it back from the money junkies, pulling it back from the war hawks, who enrich themselves at the expense of everybody else, including the life and limb of our children. Another story on the same topic is from Breitbart, the emerging Trumpian majority. And it's saying, this is not Republican versus Democrat, it's not Hillary versus Trump. This is populists versus the elitists. And they're absolutely right. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Roseanne in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I was just calling to talk about the Con website. I know he took it down today, but if you go back to the Wayback Machine on the Internet, you can it's in its entirety. If you click on the date, he took it down at 12:14 today, and I was able to get all kinds of screenshots. So if you go there, you can see it.
Yeah, the Wayback Machine is really a very good way of being able to deal with finding websites that have been taken down. And but it almost doesn't matter what he was saying in the website. The fact that he took it down just is screaming. They got something to cover up, got something to hide.
I know, but it's always just kind of funny when you feel like saying, "Excuse me, sir, you dropped this."
Yeah, actually, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Anyway, have a good one, Michael.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. All righty. Now, there's a new poll out. This is by Gravis Marketing. And what it is finding out is Americans overwhelmingly demand reduced immigration and a focus on creating jobs for the American people. These are the issues Donald Trump is campaigning on. And Americans are strongly in agreement. They're sick and tired of this flood of illegal immigrants and refugees coming into our country and literally being told it's okay for them to vote. Hillary's people are already in courts all across the country trying to strike down laws requiring proof of citizenship, proof of who you are in order to vote. That's ridiculous. When you buy a package of cigarettes or a bottle of wine or something, you got to show your ID. And you're not supposed to show your ID because, it's discriminatory during voting. That's nonsense. They're literally getting ready to give away the nation built by the American people generation after generation after generation to a bunch of people who shouldn't be here in the first place in exchange for votes in November, because today's illegal immigrant is tomorrow's Democrat. Now, getting away from the corporate media polls, which are now admittedly being rigged, we changed our methodology so that Hillary would be in front. Nate Silver has an election forecast out now saying if the general election was held today, Donald Trump would win by 15 percentage points. And that's a hefty number. The problem is it's not enough to overcome the election fraud we all know is going to be happening across the country in November. We need to push that margin higher. We need to get Donald Trump to 80%, or Hillary's people will steal this and plunge this nation into dictatorship, and Hillary's going to be so afraid of all the allegations of election fraud and corruption, she'll just clamp down this place. There'll be no more First Amendment, no more Second Amendment. That's Hillary's agenda. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right to the phone. Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I saw them talking about the Zika virus on TV yesterday.
Yes.
And now, have you ever heard of John Rappaport's view on the Zika virus?
Yes.
Yeah, where he's pretty much saying the pesticides are contributing to it rather than the virus itself.
Well, there was that question was being raised down in Brazil when Zika first surfaced there, and it seemed that they were trying to blame Zika for the microencephaly, but Zika's been around for 70 years, and it never produced that symptom ever before. So Zika is being scapegoated for something which appears to be an artifact of yet another reckless deployment of industrial chemicals. And there's even a nastier surprise behind that, because remember last year, there was this plan to release millions of these genetically modified mosquitoes over Florida in what was hoped to be a mosquito population suppression operation, which didn't work out. And the specific mosquito they released is one that can carry diseases like dengue fever and Zika. And here we are a year later, and they got an epidemic of Zika all over Florida, to the point where they're now issuing travel warnings. And southern Florida, Miami, that whole Orlando area, I mean, they're totally dependent on the tourism industry, and that's about to take a serious blow to the gut.
Yeah, and that was disturbing, too, is what I saw on TV was they're trying to prevent their babies from, having a shrunken heads. So they're spraying everywhere the pesticides, the very thing that can probably contribute to their babies having shrunken heads when they're pregnant.
Yeah, and when the kids come out with the small heads, they'll say, oh, see, it was Zika. You should have gotten your vaccine.
Exactly. It's just so twisted. Twisted and disturbing in a way. And I just can't believe it. The stuff that I see now, it makes me so angry when I see people do that, and they just buy right into it without even doing any research or looking into it. They just eat it up.
Well, fewer and fewer people do. I think at this point it is obvious that the American people have grown very skeptical. I mean, polls are showing the degree of trust in the government, Congress, the White House, and the corporate media is at all-time record lows, and that's a healthy thing. You shouldn't trust anybody in the government simply because it is the government. And after decades of seeing all this nonsense coming on out, whether it's Hanford, the Gulf oil disaster. Anytime something happens, the first thing they think of is how do we lie to make us look good here? And we've seen this before. We know that innocent parents are being thrown in prison for shaken baby syndrome because their kid died after getting a vaccine, which says on the package insert can cause sudden infant death. That's how corrupted our entire society has become. Okay?
Yeah, it's all about
it's all about the money.
Banks and the corporations.
It's all about the money. The lust for money has destroyed what used to be best in the American character. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We are getting word that heads are starting to roll over at the Democratic National Committee, including the CEO and 2 other top officials who've resigned because of revelations that came out in those leaked DNC emails on the role they played trying to sabotage Bernie Sanders on behalf of Hillary Clinton, which they weren't supposed to do. So the DNC is at least putting on the appearance of trying to clean up their act before November, but nobody's going to trust them. I certainly wouldn't. And again, that new documentary, Hillary's America, yes, it goes after Hillary Clinton, but it strikes me, based on the clips I've seen, I have not seen the whole movie yet, but it looks like it's basically going after Democrats as a whole. Because now that the Democrats have shackled themselves to Hillary Clinton, her fate is their fate. Let's see. Kevin Barrett told Press TV yesterday, political corruption is rife in the U.S. Both political parties are corrupt. He is absolutely correct. Both political parties need to be disbanded. We need to go back to the system of having any number of political parties formed by the people to promote their interest and their candidates, instead of 2 entrenched, corrupted party machines. Okay. As I mentioned before, I have reposted to the front of my website, Hillary the Spy. And I put it up there because of the WikiLeaks release of showing there was a lot more classified emails than FBI Director Comey admitted to. So please make a point of copying off that article and sending it everywhere. It is a question that deserves an answer because of the 1996 Chinagate scandal, the newly emerging one about this technology site during the Russian reset that Hillary Clinton was supporting back in 2009. It is legitimate to ask if Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the goods and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. That is a valid question. It deserves an answer. And nobody will touch it in the corporate media, not even to make fun of it. They're scared of that. Now remember, the hacker Guccifer, who seems to have vanished from the face of the earth, by the way, when he was talking about his entry into Hillary's server, he said he saw at least 10 other foreign IPs logged in at the same time going through the information on that server. All right, let's take some phone calls. Dan in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. It might be off topic, but last week you were talking about government lying and, about the Catholic Church in Columbus. And I know one of the huge lies was that the Romans knew that the planet revolved around the sun, and then they tell you that, that wasn't found out until a lot later.
Oh yeah, the Greeks knew it too.
That is a secret.
The Greeks knew it too. So did the Chinese. They all knew the Earth was round, and but the flat Earth, center of the universe thing was just vanity on the part of early Christian leaders.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that they can really. It's almost like Pol Pot, when he took over Cambodia, where they just declare a truth and day zero, when they. But I guess my question is, I've been studying about Kennewick Man, and they found Europeans in America that go back 10,000 years. And then you were mentioning, I was wondering if you could elaborate on Egyptians. You were saying that Egyptians were also in Central America.
They were visiting Central America because what they've done is they've discovered traces of cocaine in the mummies of the pharaohs. And then as now, the only place cocaine grows is Central America. And so it looks like the Egyptians were doing a regular trade across the Atlantic. And it was from the Egyptians that Plato got the story of this fabulous land beyond the Pillars of Hercules called Atlantis. And so it's entirely possible that the Americas were the source of the legend of Atlantis. And Plato couldn't figure out where it had gone, so he merged it with the story of the explosion of the Santorini volcano and just said it blew itself up. That's why it's not here anymore.
Oh, that's fascinating. I've always thought it was a weird coincidence that they built pyramids, in Central America and Egypt, around the same. Anyway, it's fascinating. I'd like to see you write a history book.
Of the last 20 years, yeah, I'd love to do that. No, the reality is, we all took Columbus across the Atlantic and everything, and we really don't know as much about history as we like to think. There are huge gaps in it. For one thing, the Polynesians were conducting regular commerce all over the Pacific Ocean 1,000 years before Columbus sailed across the Atlantic, which is really kind of a small little pond. And the methods they worked out for navigation were just amazing, how they could find where they were without any what we would consider high technology. We see glimmers of advanced thinking in the Baghdad battery, the fact that the Egyptians knew how to electroplate gold on their jewelry, the Antikythera machine, and we really don't know. I mean, humans have been in our present form for 500,000 years, through several ice ages, which have a bad habit of erasing signs of civilization. We really don't know what has gone on before this last 8,000 years that we have a record for. Anyway, listen, we need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network, and we're talking about politics, we're talking about election fraud. Dan was calling in about Egyptians in Central America, and we got onto the topic of just how little we really know of ancient history and the amazing potential. Anyway, Dan, I need to let you go. The phone lines are loading up, and we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, if you do make a history book, make sure it's a pop-up book so Obama, the Bushes, and the Clintons can understand it better.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
Hey, Mike,
Hang on. Let me put in a comment here. If I were going to write a history book, it would not be the way it's taught in school of name, place, date, name, place, date, name, place, date. I would write a history book that showed the cause and effect, because history is not individual names and places and dates. It's this constant intertwined dance of cause and effect and agenda and economy. Just like, in a way, my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, was a retelling of the U.S. history in terms of the economic forces that were hidden in the shadows. So anyway, putting that aside, you said I misspoke somewhere?
No, you made a mistake when you said it's all about the money. It's all about the Federal Reserve notes.
Well, from the point of view
money
of
is gold and silver.
Well, okay, all right, I understand. It's a term of craft, but I still think whether it's gold or silver or Federal Reserve notes, we've been driven into a situation of economic desperation by the predatory banking practices, and everybody's making those little compromises. Yes, I'm going to sell a cheaper product. I need to make more money to keep the bankers happy. Yes, I'm going to sell a dangerous drug, but I need to do it because I got to get more money to keep the bankers happy. That's what's destroying our civilization.
Hey, Mike, Webster Tarpley, I know you heard of him. I don't agree with everything he says, but he did say something that had my brain kind of working overtime. He said something about the Brexit. I don't know if you listened to. He said basically, I don't know if it's true or not because I'm not in that group, but he said it partially or whatever had to do with the renminbi. London being, the city of London being the hub for the renminbi being the world's reserve currency.
Well, it's already there. I mean, there are already yuan exchange centers in London. And if by leaving the European Union, Great Britain is ostracized economically by the U.S. and the rest of Europe, there's no reason for them not to pivot over to China and Russia and start saying, we're going to deal in your currencies now.
That's why they get put in the back of the queue, as Obama said, huh?
Yeah. It's all about maintaining the hegemonic domination of the U.S. dollar over the world, because the U.S. has abandoned its manufacturing. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And without that mafia-like piece of the action that we get from the rest of the that the U.S. government gets from the rest of the planet through this forcing them to do all trade through the U.S. dollar, the U.S. economy is going to implode. It's got nothing else to prop it up with.
Yeah, there was just another article the other day about the world is dumping securities at a record rate. China is the next empire, Mike. That's what people need to realize. They have the manufacturing. They have the people. We don't. And that's the bottom line, pretty much. That's why Britain not only left the EU, but Russia has aligned with China as Eurasia is the next, basically, capital of the world.
Yeah, they are. And they worked hard for it. And what tore our country down was this corrupted, involved with drug money laundering, money junkie ruling class that we have, who have seemed to have forgotten that the way you make a nation prosper is you make or grow products other people want to buy. And the current thinking in Wall Street and Washington, D.C. is if they can figure out a way to take some money and just shake it back and forth real fast, that somehow it's magically going to grow. And, of course, that doesn't work. And that's why we've lost our economic might to more capable competitors, whether it's China, Russia, Japan. We've lost our manufacturing. We literally bartered it away for this quest for globalism, and the rest of the world is saying, oh, great, they've just walked away from the lead in these technologies and manufacturing, and they're not going to be dumb enough to let the U.S. get it back. If the U.S. survives our current political crisis, one of the things I hope Donald Trump is going to do is revitalize NASA. Not because I want to see flags on Mars and Saturn and the rest of it, but because looking back at the original race to the moon and the technological fallout, there was this huge technology incubator, and it created new material sciences, new electronics, new methods of manufacturing, and the nation prospered all throughout the 70s and 80s on the fallout from that Apollo program. And we need another technology incubator that's operating in a peaceful pursuit. Because the military creates technology incubators, but you never get access to that technology for 10 or 20 years, by which time it's useless to try and build new products and industries with.
Would you ever go back to NASA like they asked you?
Well, if Donald Trump wants to appoint me head of NASA, I would definitely accept, and my first order would be that all the ground crews have to dress up like apes every time an astronaut returns.
As long as you do the computer animation for the backgrounds. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Scott in Norfolk. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to bring something up about Donald Trump and the Gold Star mother. And just to give you some background, I'm a former Democrat who voted for Obama the first time. And I count myself as a liberal. I will not vote for Hillary. I told myself I was never going to vote for Trump, but I believe in a lot of what he says because I'm against what he said about torture. But I'm almost there to where I might vote for him, and I'll tell you why. It came about with this Gold Star mother and her husband's remarks. The media is portraying this as if somehow Trump picked on them, when they're the ones that came out and attacked Trump first. Yes. They did it on a political stage, the biggest one you could have, the DNC convention. And to try to tell Trump he can't respond to that is un-American. To say somehow because they lost his child in a war that no one can question their attacks, it's just not logical. It's not American. A lot of people lose their kids in wars. That doesn't mean that everything, when they get up to attack people, that they should be immune from rebuttal. And I'll tell you what's got me. It was that scene of that man and his wife standing up at the podium at the DNC convention, and her wearing that headscarf
Mm-hmm.
and not saying anything and looking to him. And the whole message from the DNC the whole week was empowering women. And here we have somebody who does not look empowered. That's the visual image. I'm not saying what the reality is in that relationship, but the visual image is of a woman who does not look empowered and her husband saying that Trump is beyond forgiveness. Now, he said that later in an interview. That's not a Christian value. Beyond forgiveness. And that is not going to sit well with the electorate, male or female.
No, it isn't. And again, they stumbled badly with this because it turns out this Khan is connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. And even though they took their website down today, he has a law firm that literally sells U.S. citizenship to Muslims. He wants to bring Muslims into this country. He makes money off of everyone who comes into this country, and that's why he's opposed to Donald Trump. And when they put this guy up there, and you're right, these two he went on the attack. She was staying silent. He went on the attack. He was trying to beat up Donald Trump. And then the media turns around and says, when Donald Trump responds, oh, how can you do that to Gold Star parents? And yet at the same time, they gave Hillary Clinton a complete pass for ripping into another Gold Star mom, Pat Smith.
The thing that they did themselves in, Michael, because that image of those two standing up at the DNC convention, it obliterated the whole message of women empowerment. It took everything out of all the steam out of their sails, and I don't think they realize it yet. And I just want to make one more quick point about this election. I've been telling my liberal friends who think that Donald's never going to win because of his personality and his prior business practices. I keep telling them this is not a normal election. They don't want anything from the next president. In fact, they're really not even voting for the next president. They're voting for a personal injury lawyer to attack the establishment. And they don't care how mean that injury lawyer is, how ruthless he is, how well he treats his family, he kicks his dog. They want a fighter to go after the establishment. And you guys keep thinking by attacking Trump personally or on his business practices that's going to change the dynamic. It's not. I'm a liberal, and I'll probably vote for Trump.
Well,
because I hate the establishment.
Absolutely, and that's the way it's breaking on down here. My attitude is anybody but Hillary. If we get to November and that ballot has Hillary Clinton and Godzilla, the lizard will get my vote.
It's on several levels. One, she's corrupt.
Yes.
She's dishonest. But also, I'm against these political family dynasties. I don't want any of it.
You're right.
Un-American.
We have these two dynastic ruling families, the Bushes and the Clintons, and their plan is to pass that White House off like it's their design right, back and forth, from Bush to Clinton to Bush to Clinton to Bush to Clinton. They're already grooming Chelsea for a run at the White House down the road.
And what gets me, Mike, is shouldn't our first female president be the best selection? Why do we take the first one that's offered up to us? Isn't usually the first one that offered up is not the best? Shouldn't we be more selective? Shouldn't we wait till several more make it up to being nominated?
Forget the woman thing. Hillary's playing that woman thing here. And, we were encouraged to vote for Obama because he was going to be our first black president, and we got Obamacare, NSA spying, more wars, and a shattered economy here. We need to return to the concept of a meritocracy. Let's find the best person to be president or senator or representative. And what gender they are, what orientation they are, what color they are, should be completely irrelevant. This top office is no place for affirmative action where you have to have so many of this color and so many of this ethnic group and so many who are gay and so many of this and so many that. It's not the way it's supposed to work. We need to return to meritocracy. The best of our people should be in charge of the nation.
I agree with that, and I read a really funny sentiment about that, about Hillary. Someone wrote, "I will never vote for Monica's ex-boyfriend's wife."
Yes. I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of emails all the time from Hillary supporters saying, you're just opposed to having a woman as president. No, I don't have a problem with a woman as president. I would have supported Linda Lingle. I just didn't support Caribou Barbie because she was a ditz, and I'm not supporting Hillary Clinton because she's hopelessly corrupt. And she and her husband, together with the Bushes, have dragged this nation to the edge of absolute ruin. Anyway, Scott, I'm going to have to let you go. We've got to take a 3-minute break for commercial. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike? Mike, a couple of things, but one, I think this may turn out to be actually a blessing in disguise with that guy, what's his name, Mr. Khan there?
Yes.
It looks to me like it's starting to backfire now on the left. Yeah, because, all this stuff is coming out now about, like you said, his connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. Waleed Shubat, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's doing a yeoman's job of exposing who this guy is.
Yes.
And I really think it's going to backfire. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, as far as the Egyptians possibly coming to the New World.
Yes.
Do you think they were able to actually make it like that thousands of years ago on those, basically rowboats? And do you think it's possible that they might have had some kind of, you see these ancient aliens, that they might have had some kind of help from people from outer space?
Well, no. Again, I'm convinced the universe is full of intelligent life. I just can't think of a reason for them to waste their time down here. What do we have? But you need to go back and look at your Egyptian history because, yes, ordinary poor fishermen have these reed boats on the Nile, and they're good enough for the Nile. But if you look at some of the ship construction for the royal barges, don't forget, they built boats that were able to transport some of those stones used to build those monuments. So ancient Egypt had very solid naval architect skills. And if we look at, look at the Polynesians and the craft that they were sailing all over the Pacific 1,000 years before Columbus. Again, I think that there are still huge gaps in our real understanding of ancient history.
That's another thing I want to ask you about, too, is the American Aborigines, or the Indians, if you want to call them that. People believe, and it's a very good very good theory that they came from Siberia, because I look at sometimes in Russia today, and they have ceremonies of certain native Russians, very similar to the American Aborigines. However, do you think they actually made it as far as to the tip of South America, or do you think maybe some of those people who are considered Indians in South America may have been possibly came over from the Polynesians, or maybe even the Japanese? Because if you listen to Japanese being spoken in certain American Indian dialects, like when I used to drive through the desert from Texas to California, I used to hear the Navajo station, and the dialect, not the words. I don't understand the words enough like that. Sounded very similar to Japanese.
Well, that's a bit of a reach, but let me share something with you, because ancient Maori legend from their voyaging tradition talks about a great land off to the east that's two large land masses connected with a thin strip. And experts have pointed out tremendous similarities between the Maori beadwork and that of the American Plains Indians. There are indications that Hawaiians actually managed to reach the Pacific Northwest. We know that the Chinese beat Columbus to the New World handily. If you go back and you look at Zheng He, he was this amazing Chinese admiral, and he built these absolutely gargantuan trading ships that were all over Asia and even got into the Middle East. It's impressive. And I think sometimes we all get very arrogant with, we live in this modern age and we've got all this new technology, and we forget what was possible with the older technologies because we've forgotten how to use them. That's one of the nice things about the Hawaiian Voyaging Society, is they're redeveloping those ancient navigator skills where they can cross the ocean without needing GPS or compasses or sextants.
And the other thing is, too, if you look at pure-blooded Native Americans, they look very Asiatic, really, or Oriental, whatever you want to call them. It's very similar to Mongols or even to, like I said, people of Siberia.
There have been some genetic studies done that do indicate at least part of their genetic background does come from Siberia. They crossed over during the last ice age, and just went along the coastline in their boats, same way that the Vikings went across to the New World. They didn't sail straight across. They followed the islands to islands to islands, and if you really look at a globe of the Earth, it's not that far to get from Europe to the New World following that northern route. And you've got lots of places to stop. Okay, we got to go. Thank you for the phone call, Mark. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to turn our focus over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. And as one of our callers pointed out earlier in the day today, it's not going very well for the United States at all. The Syrian army and popular forces are advancing in Aleppo. They're recapturing more lands. And apparently they've kicked out all the U.S.-backed rebels from Al-Baz, Muta, and Al-Moheba. So the trend is clearly obvious. Nearly 1,000 of the militants laid down their arms and surrendered to the Syrian army in Daraa. Assad has done something very bright. He's going to give them all a pardon. Just quit fighting, put your gun down, go home. That's it. End of story. Now, these rebels who surrendered are reporting that the U.S.-backed forces are threatening to murder their families if they surrender. That's how desperate the situation has gotten over there. Well, the U.S. is trying to find some way to stop this because a lot of people are running around with their heads in their hands and saying, oh, it's another Vietnam, another humiliating defeat where the mighty United States of America gets kicked out of one of these small, little, troublesome countries that refuse to do as they're told. John Kerry came on out. This is an article in antiwar.com. Speaking to reporters today, Secretary of State John Kerry demanded Russia and the Syrian government halt all offensive operations inside Syria and make no more moves against the rebel factions. Kerry went on to say Russia has an obligation to ensure that the Assad government is trying to stop trying to gain territory. I mean, talk about imperial hubris. For Kerry to go on and say, we demand that you stop these offensive moves. Well, Mr. Kerry, something you need to keep in mind. You are Secretary of State of the United States of America. You have no legal authority in Syria. Assad is the democratically elected president of Syria. He is the legitimate government. And he gets to say where his army goes and when. How would you feel if Canada came on down and started telling the Pentagon you're not allowed to send troops over here or over there? Wouldn't go down very well. And for Kerry to come on out and say, Russia has an obligation, he's just making that up. Russia's obligation is to the Syrian government, which asked them to come on in and help deal with these U.S.-backed forces. And we know the U.S. was backing them because of these leaked emails. President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was sending arms, smuggling arms, gun running to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. And they were doing it through that consulate in Benghazi. That's why it got targeted. Story coming out of Global Research. Democratic Party's inflammatory anti-Putin rhetoric prepares escalation of the Syrian war. So what is the United States going to do? Just haul off and go ahead and invade Syria? Go into direct conflict with Russia? The U.S. has no legitimate reason to be inside Syria. They can't even claim they're there fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda anymore, because they're all but gone. And when the Syrian war is over, Syria will be aligned with Russia. It's another major foreign policy blunder. It's this generation's equivalent of Vietnam, and it's going to encourage other nations that it is in fact possible to resist U.S. installations of puppet regimes in their country. Well, rather than let Syria be a bummer, the U.S. is changing its focus back over to Libya, and they're bombing the heck out of the place to bolster the UN-created government. Now, they're calling it the UN-created government to basically distract from the fact this is another installed U.S. puppet regime. Remember, that leaked email came on out saying the reason the U.S. went into Libya was to get rid of that gold-backed dinar because it was a threat to the Federal Reserve, not just in Libya, but all over Africa. All of the African nations wanted to use that as their trade and cross-border currency. And what's going on in Libya is the Libyan people do not want to live under a puppet ruler. And they're trying to kick the puppet government out. And the U.S. is, once again, bombing civilians to punish them for refusing to accept foreign rule. And it's another quagmire. Just like Afghanistan has turned into, just like Iraq has turned into, over at The Intercept, they have a story basically saying that the U.S. can't predict an endpoint in this new bombing campaign in Libya. But trust us, we're only bombing ISIS and Al-Qaeda. No, they're bombing civilians. Now, the U.S. is trying to patch things up with Turkey, and Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, met with Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim, trying to repair the damage from the coup d'etat. And it doesn't look like it was all that successful, because he then went over to the Incirlik Air Base to cheer up the troops and say, we're trying to figure this out. Now, at this point, Turkey's holding a lot of cards. They still want Gulen to be extradited. That will be a huge political embarrassment for the United States. Turkey could simply hang on to those forces on the ground. They could literally commandeer the entire air base. It's already surrounded by 7,000 Turkish troops. And the real prize in there is some 50 to 90 nuclear weapons that were pre-positioned in Turkey to threaten Russia with. Because after all, Russia's being the aggressor here. So we're going to wag our nuclear bombs at them. And that may have backfired. Worst case scenario, the United States may have just created a new nuclear power in the Middle East to rival Israel. Turkey has come on out naming a second American coup plotter. CIA's Henry Barkey is being accused by Turkey of having planned and participated in the failed coup d'etat. Okay, let's grab some phone calls. Joe in Indiana, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Michael. I'll be brief. A previous caller, you were talking about ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. It was possible if they could have taken those reed boats and gotten across the Atlantic. And you may recall back in the 1950s, 60s, there was a cultural anthropologist, and he built a huge reed boat, and he sailed it across the Atlantic from Egypt and made it to the United States.
Yeah, Thor Heyerdahl.
It was called, pardon me?
Thor Heyerdahl, and that was his second expedition because he'd also built a reed boat and sailed it from Easter Island to South America. But we know that the actual Polynesian craft back then was much more sophisticated than what he built. But he did prove it could be done.
Yeah, he was remarkable. It was called Kontiki. I think they wrote a couple of books about it. It might be a movie. So it'd be something to look into. But yeah, I just wanted to get back to that caller and let him know that it has been tried.
Yeah,
thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. The Kontiki was the one that he did in the Pacific. And if memory serves me correct, the one that he sailed from Egypt was called simply Ra. All right, let's switch over to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I wanted to ask you a question, Michael, which was, for one, I believe that Israel is working towards, growing and, basically expanding. And that's what their long-term goal is in Syria. And I'm wondering, what kind of false flag plot will they use to develop a narrative that they can be the victims? Because you have to be a victim before you can advance and conquer. So do you think they would stage maybe a phony either bombing or something along the border in a mostly immigrant town in Israel and then frame it on what's left of Syria as an excuse to...
Sure they could. And Israel's already talking about annexing more of the Golan for a security buffer. And we know that Israel has been caught before sending forces across the border and firing rockets back into Israel that are aimed at empty dirt lots in order to say, oh, we were attacked, they destroyed the radio station at Gleiwitz, we must go to war. Obviously, a very ripe target for terrorism are going to be the Rio Olympics. They're so economically stressed down there, their security can't be all that good. And we know that terror attacks at prior Olympics have turned out to be false flags. So it's going to be a ripe target. And there are so many people right now who desperately need a false flag. Hillary needs one to take the media focus off of her, the DNC emails, her own emails, all these erupting scandals. They need something really, really, really big. And we're getting all these big...
No, I had another question for you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, and that is, did you hear about 2 months ago, Netanyahu's comment that imagining 3 other Israels, ironically one in Yemen, one in Afghanistan, and one in Libya? Did you hear that he floated that trial balloon?
No, actually I hadn't, and I'm not sure if he's talking about really establishing disconnected parts of Israel. The plan has always been what's called Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, the Israel described in the Old Testament, from the Nile to the Euphrates. And that seems.
And do you think? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and do you think that's code on the ISIS flag? Because the ISIS flag almost looks like it says "All Jews 2050." Do you think that was written by some Mossad agents fooling around as code for other Jews?
I haven't studied the ISIS flag close enough. I mean, generally I like to use the one that's got the CIA written into the middle. But basically Israel has always been expansionist. Israel wants all of the land from the Nile to the Euphrates, and they just think everybody else ought to just surrender their homes and leave. And they can't understand why people aren't willing to go along with that.
I think that's what they're up to. I think their goal is to basically just destroy all their immediate neighbors eventually for expansionism. I think that's the goal. And Jordan better watch out.
Yeah, it better. And by the way, Israel has been fully on board this moving of Middle Eastern refugees into Europe, because these refugees are leaving behind empty lands, empty homes, empty towns for more Israeli settlements.
Exactly. I absolutely believe that's the long-term agenda and the hidden agenda, and why nobody is really mentioning it, in the media. I think there's basically a cover-up.
Well, the cover-up is very, very simple. This whole forced migration, illegal immigration, refugee crisis has blown up in everybody's faces. It's triggered this epidemic of violence and rape and acts of terror, but they don't want to report on it because they're trying to disconnect all of these violent crimes from the refugee agenda. Good luck on doing that in a world where we have social media and the internet. And we already know they're trying to take draconian control of the internet and block certain stories in order to push their agenda. But the more they do that, the more obvious it becomes. It's like Reuters being spotted, rigging their poll to favor Hillary. It's impossible for any of these people to get away with something, because you're literally having millions of independent thinking, critical analysts out here on the internet who are looking at each new claim put forward by the corporate media and the government, and they're ripping it to shreds.
Yeah, and the press is losing, and no wonder why the press is invalid and illegitimate. People are looking elsewhere.
Well, they did it to themselves, and I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. And I'll tell you something. The corporate media must have an inflated view of my little operation here, because every time another newspaper or TV station lays off staff here in Hawaii, I immediately get resumes. They want to come on over here and work for me and say, good luck, I'm not even being paid. So,
it's a good ego boost for you, though.
Oh, yeah, not that my ego needs any help at this point. All right, well, listen, Paul, going to let you go here. Want to get back to the news. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Now, apparently, the latest saber-rattling from the United States is the U.S. led a nuclear strike bomber exercise over the Baltic. They're actually up there flying nuclear bombers close to Russia's border, and they're only doing it to respond to Russian aggression, because Russia's being the aggressor here. Russia made us do all this, mommy. Now, Donald Trump is out there with something that, once again, he's making sense. when Donald Trump was up in Columbus, Ohio, he said, any attempt by the U.S. or Europe to take Crimea away from Russia would probably be the trigger of World War III. And he's absolutely right. And our corporate media is still pushing the agenda that Russia stole Crimea from Ukraine. And no such thing happened. For those of you not paying attention, when the U.S. overthrew the legitimate government of Ukraine and put in a junta, the people of Crimea said, well, it's not a government we elected, and therefore we're going to break off and go our own way, which they are allowed to do under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the U.S. has signed. So the people of Crimea held a referendum, and the overwhelming majority said, we don't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. Then, the people of Crimea held a second referendum, and the overwhelming majority of Crimeans said, we want to be part of the Russian republics. And at that point, Crimea's leaders called up Putin and said, we'd like to be part of your show over there. Putin said yes. That's how it came about. Putin didn't invade Crimea. He didn't steal Crimea. He doesn't need to. Nations are pivoting to Russia for a very simple reason. Russia's making deals, and the U.S. only knows how to make war. And everybody's, just like the American voters are getting sick and tired of Washington, D.C., so is the rest of the world. Now, getting back to Israel, apparently Israel has decided, while everybody's distracted by conventions and hacked emails and the rest of it, they're reducing further the amount of water going into Palestinian homes. And this is a form of collective punishment, and collective punishment is considered a war crime under international law. Meanwhile, down in Brazil, possibly to try and calm things down before the Olympics, Brazil has sent 1,200 troops to crack down on gangs that launched an all-out war on the government. These gangs may be more U.S. puppets. Another attempt at a overthrow of a non-cooperative government and the imposition of a puppet regime. Meanwhile, out in the South China Sea, responding to the continuing U.S. presence, China has now conducted live fire drills near their islands. They're using real live rockets, missiles, bombs, ammunition. We'll be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on to the news in the war zones. Japan is engaging in flat-out fear-mongering, and they're now out there saying North Korea's missiles can now hit the mainland United States of America. Frankly, with the poor success they've had testing those rockets, and I think I know what the problem with them is. That's a bit of a reach. But if North Korea has rockets that can hit the U.S. mainland accurately, where did they get that guidance technology? They probably got it from China. Where did China get it? They got it from Bill Clinton back in 1996. Now, over at the Pentagon, along with all the problems with the F-35, the Gerald R. Ford, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships, and everything else, apparently they've gone back to that problem that they just can't keep track of their money. And there's a story that came out. They're claiming it's sloppy bookkeeping, but they can't find $6.5 trillion of your money. They don't know where it went. But hey, the American taxpayer is generous. I'm sure they'll give us some more to play with here. Now, getting on to the economic news. China's in the middle of their own property bubble, and it's starting to look like they could have their equivalent of a subprime crisis. We were talking the other day about how home ownership in the United States is at record lows. The United States is not alone. Home ownership in Britain is at the lowest levels in 30 years. Because the money junkies do not get rich other than by making everybody else around them poor. That's just the way it works. Now, last week we got the GDP numbers. And The expert analysts were expecting a great second quarter, and it wasn't. It was less than half of what some of the experts were predicting, and at the same time, the U.S. went back and revised earlier GDP numbers, most of them lower. It's not good. Now, over at CNBC, Wilbur Ross and Peter Navarro are out there saying that Donald Trump is 100% correct on these free trade deals. It's destroying America. And it is, because it's allowing our jobs to go away to other countries. Now, there's a simple reality you've got to keep in mind. If it's free trade, you don't need an agreement. If you look closely at the TPP and the TTIP, it's very restrictive trade. You only buy certain things from this country. You only sell certain things to that country. And the worst part of all is that it raises multinational corporations above the level of the civilian government, meaning governments that attempt to pass laws to protect the health and safety of their own people can literally be overruled by the corporations who are making money off this stuff. We're going to take a break for our top of the hour station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Okay, let me get that posted to the website here. We're talking about the economy. And when I was younger, they used to have something called the Big Mac Index, that the true measure of the economy was how much a Big Mac would cost. Now, I was a kid when McDonald's came out with the Big Mac, and it was very inexpensive and also a lot bigger than it is today. But there's another article that came on out. This is from Zero Hedge. And instead of the Big Mac, they go with a more generic measure of consumer prices, the burrito. They're calling it the burrito index to measure inflation. And what they've discovered looking at these prices for identical burritos is that even though the government is claiming that what $1 bought in 2001 can be bought for $1.35 today, they actually found out it's much worse. That it's actually $1.60 today. So there's a big news flash for you. The government is still lying about the economy. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call from Kathleen in Paris. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Go ahead and grab a phone call from Kathleen in Paris. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Michael.
Can you turn down your speaker? Can you turn down your speaker so we're not listening to me?
Okay, is this okay?
Yeah.
If I go in the other room with my...
Okay, well, what's on your mind? What's on your mind?
It was back to the free trade. I was happy to hear you say that, yes, we have free trade up until there's an agreement. If you have free trade, why do you need an agreement? Do you still have the echo?
No, the echo is gone. I can hear you just fine.
Okay. And so I heard somebody speaking recently about that, about the regulations on the trading into France. And they said that you would not believe, it was like more than 100 regulations if you want to sell something as simple as a pillowcase in France.
Mm-hmm.
The measurements and diameters and everything controlled like that, how many threads and that. And so that's why I think that we have Brexit.
Well, that was definitely a big part of it. I mean, the EU was originally sold as a free trade zone and then morphed into this hideous dictatorship that was just controlling absolutely everything. And one thing we learned here in the United States of America is very often these regulations that are put out on products are actually crafted to serve a particular established corporate interest. And I'll give you a good example. When they first started talking about getting rid of Edison-style tungsten light bulbs, and they came out with new requirements for home lighting, the only existing product that met the new requirements were the compact fluorescent bulbs being put out then by General Electric. And so General Electric made a huge amount of money because these regulations were created to basically ban all competing products. Now, of course, today we have LEDs.
Yeah. I just thought it was humorous that this person was talking about there was more than 100 regulations controlling, just if you want to sell a pillowcase in France that you have to meet.
Yeah, it is. It's ridiculous. It absolutely is. I'll go down to the local hardware store and I'll buy something like a hammer, and it's covered with all these stickers on how, don't hit yourself in the head with it, don't whack your thumb, we warned you, you can't sue us. And it's almost like there's, one person to make the hammer and 20 other people making money putting stickers on it and filling out the paperwork. And that's not a very healthy way to run a manufacturing economy.
No, but yes, and the main reason, which I think you already stated on air, is that the reason we don't want the TPP is it overrides our sovereign contracts that we have inside our own countries.
That's why so many people are opposed to it, and that's why they tried to keep TPP and TTIP concealed from the general public because of the public outcry. But thanks to WikiLeaks, a lot of this stuff got on out, and that's why people are digging in their heels and saying this is not about free trade, this is about restrictive trade, this is about favoring corporations above our civil elected governments, and people are very much opposed to that. The success of the Brexit vote dealt a major setback to the TTIP, and already we're seeing other countries that were involved are really starting to have second thoughts, and they're starting to pull out. Same thing over with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. One of the big sticking points was a ban on GMO labeling, which most of the countries around the Pacific, if they're not banning GMOs, they have very strict labeling laws, and they don't want to reverse themselves in the face of pressure from the United States. So they've hit a bit of a stumbling block there as well.
Was there an earlier caller that said, I'm on to Israel now, staging a false flag? Did somebody suggest that Israel might stage a false flag in its own country? Did I understand that? Yeah,
false flags are very often effective in your own country. I mean, Hitler did it at Gleiwitz or the Reichstag fire. And, Hillary... I know, but... Israel needs to play the perpetual victim, and we know they're already talking about annexing more of the Golan Heights. We know that Israel wants to go back into Lebanon. They still want that Litani River. And the way they will start a war is they'll pretend that they're being attacked, and therefore they have to respond with the net result that they get more land.
Yes. I know about the Greater Israel Project and all that. I just cannot fathom that Israel would kill one single Jewish person.
Well, first of all, let me do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network right now. And you need to understand, all world leaders are willing to kill their own people to make a point. We know now that Franklin Roosevelt spent all of 1941 goading Japan into the attack on Pearl Harbor, knowing it was going to cost him ships and their crews. We know that the people who wanted to drag the U.S. into World War I knowingly sent all those passengers on the Lusitania into the risk of possible death, because nothing sells a war like wagging a bloody shirt. And from the point of view of world leaders, we're just assets. They don't connect with us. They don't respect us. And yeah, they'll gladly see tens, thousands killed as long as it gets to the agenda they want to have.
Yeah, I understand, and I know 9/11 was a false flag, but were there any Jews in the Twin Towers?
There were Jews. There were no Israelis, but there were Jewish people in the Twin Towers, American citizens who were Jews. They didn't get the warning.
Well, thank you for taking my call.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to the economy, Ruby Tuesday, which is a wonderful restaurant, by the way, has fallen victim to the restaurant recession. We talked about that a week ago, where Americans no longer have the money to be going out and eating. And you can see that already. You've probably seen these commercials by all the pizza companies where, you know, they're just slashing the price. If you'll come on in and pick up your own pizza, you can get a huge pizza for just a few bucks. They're just struggling. And Ruby Tuesday is one of my favorite restaurants. They closed the one at Ala Moana, and apparently they're shutting down another 11 of their restaurants in Illinois. Forget what the government is telling you about the economy is doing great. Just look around where you live at all the empty retail vacancies, all the really cool restaurants and stores that used to be there, and they're gone now. Now, there's a little bit of good news from the world of banking and corruption. Not too long ago, Baron David de Rothschild was indicted for all kinds of financial fraud, and you would think a guy with that much money wouldn't have to do that, but he did. And now, because of the indictment, the French government has launched an investigation into the entire Swiss branch of the Rothschild banking empire. Meanwhile, down in Italy, where they're having serious problems with their banks, the former CEO of Italian Regional Bank is now under house arrest. And apparently, police are now searching the homes of 14 other bank executives. That's how you deal with the banking corruption. You don't just give them more money from the taxpayers and say, promise to do better, like they do here in the United States. All righty, let's see. We're going to get on here to the immigration refugee situation. And reported in SHTFplan.com, with terror and rape spreading, self-defense weapons permits hit record highs in Germany. Now, the German people have their own form of gun control. They don't have the same rights that people in Switzerland do. But they're buying pepper spray, tasers, which in Germany you need to apply for a permit. You have to get a permit for a taser or pepper spray in Merkel's Germany. But the people are filling out the paperwork, and sales are booming because of all that's going on. Over in Finland, a 15-year-old boy was assaulted and robbed by a gang of 10 to 15 immigrants and then thrown off a bridge into the sea. Finland has had enough with this nonsense, and they're now saying that 77% of the Iraq migrants are going to be sent home, even though it means a huge crushing fine from Brussels. This whole blur the world's population together into one lump isn't working out very well. Over in France, apparently some Muslims screaming Allah Akbar stopped a bus and set it on fire. Hit it with a Molotov cocktail. The French media is ignoring it. The new policy is when there are acts of terror, they are not publishing the names or pictures of the terrorists because they don't want the French people to be linking this sudden surge in terror attacks and rapes and violence with the refugee crisis, because they're still trying to salvage that New World Order agenda. Now, over in Great Britain, a Labour MP, Thangam Debonair, is saying that we can solve all these problems as long as new-coming refugees are given a course in women's equality. And, by the way, while we're doing it, we should force all the men to take that course as well. Remember what I said about whatever happens, how do you use it to fit your agenda? Now, the head of the London police is out there with the booga booga, saying it's a matter of when, not if, terror attack highly likely in UK. Aren't you going to be sorry you left the European Union? Well, if there is another terror attack in Great Britain, I will expect this chief of police to tender his resignation for not having discovered it and stopped it. Because every time there's another terror attack, it simply says everything that all these governments are doing in the name of combating terrorism, it doesn't work. The spying on law-abiding citizens hasn't stopped terror attacks. The banning of guns from law-abiding citizens hasn't worked. No-fly lists, watch lists have not worked. That priest who got his throat cut last week had it done to him by a guy who was on the terror watch lists, was awaiting trial on a terrorism charge, had been placed on house arrest, had a radio tag on his ankle, and he still committed an act of terror. It's not working. Now, setting aside all the actors working for governments, creating false flag terror, I know how to stop all terror attacks in the world. Stop mucking about with other people's countries, and they'll go home. It's not like somebody gets up one morning and says, you know, there's really nothing on TV. I think I'm going to go on out and blow up a school bus. It doesn't work that way. People are responding to the destruction of their countries from outside. The drone strikes that are killing their family, their friends, their neighbors. If we stop doing that, the terror problem goes away. Except for the phony actors who are working for CIA and Mossad, who are out there trying to create fear so that you'll cling to Big Daddy government and say, save me from the horrible ISIS. And then we find out the U.S. government's been supporting ISIS, giving them weapons. Now, following the release of the Chilcot report, there was a lot of talk about sending phony Tony Blair to The Hague. The Hague refused. There are civil lawsuits being filed by the families of everybody who was killed or crippled in Iraq. And apparently out in California, there was a civil lawsuit filed against George W. Bush et al. On the legality of the Iraq War. And here's where it gets obvious how corrupted our government is. The Department of Justice has blanket stated the Chilcot report will not be admissible as evidence in this case. The Chilcot report makes it obvious that we were lied into that war. This is a courtroom. We can't have the truth in here. Just rumor and innuendo and whatever it takes to keep the government going. Last week we were talking about this scandal where the Veterans Administration, which has a horrible, horrible record of neglecting our wounded veterans, had gone on out and spent $18 million on artwork for their lobbies and offices. We had that other story going on out about how they had, in just 1 year, spent $100 million on taking themselves to various conferences. According to media watchers, CBS and NBC have yet to cover the story about the VA spending all this money on artwork. It's just not important. We've got more important things to do, like demonize Putin and claim that Donald Trump is his henchman, because that's what we're here to do. Now, do you remember that big stink about how the IRS was targeting and harassing political opponents of Barack Obama? And there was that big stink over Lois Lerner's emails, which were lost. The hard drive broke down. We just quit using the backup service. These things happen. And it was all just negligence and carelessness, just like FBI Director Comey was claiming in the case of Hillary Clinton. Well, newly released documents pried loose by Judicial Watch proved that the IRS was, in fact, intentionally targeting political opponents of Obama and dissident groups like the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. It began in 2010. It was deliberate. And by the way, use of the IRS against one's political enemies was one of the articles of impeachment against Richard M. Nixon. Now here's where we're getting into the real twilight zone. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. Researchers at the University of Salamanca have developed a sentiment analysis algorithm that monitors Twitter and Facebook. And apparently this psychologist, Paul Ekman, has worked with the CIA, DOD, and DHS for years, developing automated systems to find people who are thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. And apparently they're looking at a plan to use emotive analytics to arrest Americans. They're literally talking about arresting people for having bad thoughts. Talk about a dictatorship. And finally, we have this story about this FBI employee, 20 years with the FBI, pled guilty to spying and leaking sensitive information to China. And his defense was, hey, I figured if the Clintons got away with it in 1996, it must be okay, and I didn't mean to do anything wrong, so that gets me off the hook. Right, Mr. Comey? It's amazing. Another Stinky Badges story. California police actually shot a suicidal man and claimed he lunged at them. The videos show otherwise. He was just standing there with a knife at his own throat, and all of a sudden the cops just uncorked on him. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about some of the police abuses which continue to be a problem. And I really loved this story. This came out of Orlando, Florida. Police officers pulled over a guy, and they saw this white, suspicious-looking substance on the floor of the car. They did 2 tests on it using their portable drug testing kit. Both tests came back positive for meth. They arrested this guy, threw him in jail, and it wasn't until the real police laboratory came on back and said, you idiots, it's sugar frosting from a donut. Now, there are a couple of implications here. First of all, are our police so drugged out on prescription antidepressants they no longer recognize a donut when they see it? And second, how many people have been wrongfully imprisoned by the use of these portable testing kits which clearly do false positives? It wasn't one mistake. They did it twice. And it came back positive for meth both times. Now, a little bit of good news. Following an all-day demonstration by the Millions March New York City over police brutality and demanding the resignation of the New York City Police Commissioner, the New York City Police Commissioner resigned. So, if you get enough people out there in the streets, you can bring about some positive change. Yesterday, we were reporting on this story about how the head of the ATF wants a national gun owner database. Well, it turns out they already have one. They're claiming it was created by accident. And maintaining it was actually violating the ATF's own policies. According to the Government Accountability Office, ATF failed to remove the names of gun purchasers from its multiple sales database and another system called Access 2000, which allowed it to stockpile information on lawful gun owners by scouring the records of out-of-business federal firearms license holders. When you buy a gun and you fill out the paperwork to own that gun, the government is supposed to take it on in, check it against criminal background, and then lose it. And the ATF didn't. Now, here's a really bizarre story. Apparently, they're coming up on the census down under in Australia. And the Australian government has literally gone to the lengths of urging Australians not to put down Jedi as their religion in the census. Because apparently so many people are doing that, it's messing up the caucus results. Interfering with people's religions you are. Yes, yes, yes. What if they really believe they're Jedi? Or flying spaghetti monster? You're not messing up the census by putting down Jedi if that's what you really want your religion to be. Anyway. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the show, but I'm going to mention it again. As you know, they're having a major outbreak of Zika virus down in Florida. And there's a lot of confusion over whether it's really connected with the microencephalic babies that were coming out of Brazil, because Zika's been around for almost 70 years, and it's never had that effect before. But still, Zika is now in the country. The pharmaceutical companies are rushing to make a vaccine that they can sell, and they're having happy times over there. There's a little bit of a wrinkle. Last year, in an effort to control mosquito populations, the government released literally millions and millions of genetically modified mosquitoes who were supposed to act as a form of birth control. That apparently did not work. Even worse, the specific species of mosquito that was manufactured and released over Florida is the species that transmits diseases like dengue fever and Zika. There's a bit of an oopsie there. Really kind of messed that one up. So, another little story. There are now some 50 holistic doctors who have died under very questionable circumstances. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the large number of holistic doctors who have died mysteriously. Going back to Jeffrey Bradstreet, was found dead in a river with a gunshot wound, declared a suicide. Family hired their own investigators who said no, it was a murder. And more of the families of these slain doctors are starting to do the same. They don't trust the official story anymore. Why should they? Why should they? Now, the reasons for the killings appear to center on two different issues. One has to do with a compound called GC-MAF, which shows tremendous promise as being an actual cancer cure. Not just a treatment of the symptoms, but an actual cure. The second aspect has to do with a protein called nagalase. Now, nagalase is a protein that is generated by cancer cells in your body to destroy your body's ability to fight the cancer off naturally. And some of these scientists discovered nagalase is in many of these vaccines we're being ordered to take. And there is no legitimate reason for nagalase to be in the vaccines. It's not a vaccine, it's not an adjuvant. It is a chemical that destroys your own body's natural immune system, which of course would make you more economically dependent on the medical industrial complex. And when you look at the kind of money that's involved with vaccines and cancer treatments, you begin to understand why there's obviously a motive for this to be going on in this, the corrupted United States of America. Now, out in Washington State, they're having this huge fire near the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which is the most toxic, radioactively contaminated place on planet Earth. And in order to try and keep the fire from getting to Hanford, they set a backfire on Rattlesnake Mountain on Sunday night in order to burn back and create a natural fire break. It may have been too late because workers for the Hanford Fire Department are being tested and they're testing positive for radioactive contamination. And this is internal contamination. No way to ever get it out. And apparently, out of 150 workers at the Hanford Fire Department, 104 have now requested tests of their bodily fluids to see if they've been exposed. I feel sorry for everybody living downwind and downwater of Hanford. They've clearly lost control of that. Alrighty, now Donald Trump, interestingly enough, is now warning people that maybe it's time to sell stocks. That there are some very scary scenarios for investors. Again, same thing that we already know about. Credit card lending has reached a 9-year high. And of course, having to use your credit cards is a trap because of those sky-high interest rates on those credit cards. These are people who are desperate. They can't get money anywhere else to buy food, to pay their rent. They're having to resort to the credit cards, and that just makes their debt problem worse. Okay. Another article, this one coming out of PatriotRising.com. America's electronic voting machines are scarily easy targets. And they're absolutely right. Bev Harris did all this research on the Diebold system, the GEMS system, and she found 12 different ways the elections can be rigged without leaving a trace. It has to be by design. Diebold was one of the first companies to make automated bank teller machines. And they were legendary for never losing a penny from one end of the country to the other. They had paper trails. Anytime you used one of their little ATMs, you would hear that printer inside chattering out a paper record. They were fully auditable, traceable. Everybody knew where all the money went. And the same company produced a voting machine with no audit capability, no transparency, wide open to hacking. You can't tell me that's an accident. It had to be deliberate. Bernie Sanders supporters are out there saying that the Democratic National Committee's treatment of surrogate Nina Turner shows that their calls for unity are just so much hot air. What the DNC means by unity is you will unite under Hillary, or bad things will happen to you. Another article coming out from Investment Watch blog commenting on the same thing I noticed based on the earlier Fox News report. All the billionaires are coming out for Hillary. The Billionaires for Hillary Club is growing. Why? They know that Hillary Clinton will unleash Wall Street and they'll get even richer than they already are. And most of these people are so rich, they're never going to live long enough to spend it all. That's when you know you're dealing with a money addict, when they've already got more money than they could ever possibly use themselves, and still they have that drive, that need to get more. Greed is a sickness, and it's running epidemic in our country. I don't see the FDA coming out with any vaccine for that one, do you? Anyway. Oh. All righty, let's see. Let me get back on here. China is once again making a leap into the forefront of science and technology. One thing they're doing, they are just completing a brand new radio telescope. It looks a lot like the one down in Arecibo. It's built into a natural depression in the mountains, only this one in China is something like 3 times the size of Arecibo. And not to be outdone anywhere else, China is building their own Large Hadron Collider that will be twice the size of CERN's and 7 times as powerful. Now, I'm a little concerned because at some point there is the possibility that a moment's carelessness could create something called a quantum black hole. And you drop that, there's no taking it back. They're into some very, very dangerous possibilities here. Now, there's one theory that a quantum black hole won't last. It'll leak out through its gravity. That's a theory. Nobody knows because nobody's ever actually found a quantum black hole, which, by the way, is one of the arguments against the Big Bang. And this article talks about the God particle. And I have a concern there as well. Now, CERN claimed to have found something that sort of kind of maybe looked like the predicted Higgs boson. Now, the Higgs boson is a necessary component of the Big Bang theory, because the way that cosmologists have decided they're going to get away from the fact that the Big Bang itself, the primordial egg that everything came from, would have been the universe's biggest black hole. And calculations show that at the point where scientists claim natural forces started working, the entire mass of the universe was still inside the event horizon of its own mass, and it would have collapsed back in on itself. Now, I've written an article called The Big Bang is Just Science, Religion Masquerading as Science. And I pointed out something that we may not be seeing anything that's really in the universe. Particle physicists like to joke that studying matter with colliders is like smashing 2 mechanical clocks together and trying to guess what the clocks looked like based on the springs and gears and levers that fly out. But if you take that analogy one step further and speculate that given enough speed at the moment of collision, individual teeth from the clock gears will come flying out as separate, distinct pieces. But clearly, prior to the collision, they didn't exist as separate, distinct pieces. Their separatedness was created by the collision of the moment. And the same may be true for a lot of these particles that are coming out of these colliders. They may not exist in nature. They may be artifacts of the experimental process. And nobody really knows. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good afternoon, Michael. Universe is an amazing place. The Dumbbell Nebula, I call it, the Dumbbell Nebula. What I do want to say is this about the polls. Speaking of dumbbell stuff, look at these polls that the Democrats are putting out with CNN and all these polling. Michael, who are they polling? Black Lives Matter and La Nada?
Well, they're not.
Because everybody I talk to here in Florida, all the white people I'm talking to, all vote for Trump.
Well, the Black Lives Matter people are starting to vote for Trump, too, because of Hillary's trust issue. But it was actually admitted to by the corporate media that right about the same time the Democratic convention was ending, they changed their polling methodology, which is a very polite word of saying they're rigging the polls to favor Hillary Clinton. Every online poll has Donald Trump leading by a landslide. But if you're going to steal the election, you have to rig the media's polls first so that people don't get suspicious.
Well, Michael, the Clinton News Network, you know who they are.
Yes.
And you get this Rachel Madcow, you got the Madcow and these lesbians and all these homos that are in these news networks. I can't believe it. Like,
okay, Tom, can we leave their orientation out of it? The issue is that people who work for the corporate media are paid to lie. That's why they make those $1 million salaries, and their private lives really are not germane to the discussion. Okay?
And I agree. That's my point. That's my point, Michael. But listen, I just want to say this. Now, like you said, unlike Donald Trump, all these Newsmax, they got Trump winning in a landslide. But the people are controlling, like Ted Turner said, he who controls that mass media controls the mind. It's exactly right. And I tell you, people, I just don't get it. It's a shock, like that lightning bolt I just heard.
Well,
shocking to me.
Well, the good news is they've gone so far overboard, everybody is noticing what they're doing. See, propaganda and disinformation only works when the population doesn't know it's being used on them. And the more brazen the lies get, everybody at some point says, this is nonsense. Of course, they're lying. And Hillary's comment about how James Comey agreed with her that she was being truthful about the email server. That one brought up a lot of people, including some in the corporate media, which is now the Clinton campaign is out there trying to say, well, she didn't lie, she just shared her honest opinion of what she thought James Comey had said.
She just said a little fib. But, Michael, one more thing. Did you see the interview? Did you see the thing today with Obama and this guy, Premier Lee, in Indonesia and Singapore? Did you hear what the guy from Singapore said today, Michael? Did you look at the speech? The guy is literally saying Japan is not breeding any more kids, and they're eventually going to be taken over by a foreign group, and he's saying the same thing about the United States. He's saying the demographics of the United States in the next 50 years will not look nothing like what it is now. The guy from the Prime Minister who was speaking with Obama and Osama today was basically saying the United States is in for a rude awakening because these women are not even having children in their own countries. And guess what? 50 years from now, it will be the third world people that will be taking over these countries. And how are they going to run them?
Well,
you have to watch the...
Without without U.S. outside interference, I'm sure they'll run their countries very well. I mean, their politicians will still be corrupt, but most of what the third world is suffering is imported from outside by U.S. and Western intervention. Now, the issue about women, not having babies, that's a serious one because there has been a really sharp decline in birth rates here in the United States. Now, partly that's explained by the economy. Young families understand they can't afford to have a child, and they're putting it off. But there's also that issue about the epicite gene, which was funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to create corn that, when eaten, sterilizes people. And I noticed that the decline in birth rates in the United States has primarily been among Hispanics, who are the highest per capita consumers of corn. And so if that epicite gene has broken into the wild, then we could see literally an extinction-level event in the next 50 years.
Well, correct. And, Michael, I remember I read an article about France. The French government is actually thinking about paying their native women to have children because they're bringing all these refugees in there. And if they don't start paying their women, they won't even have a culture. They won't have no cultural identity left as a European in the next 50 years. It'll be all Muslim.
Well,
we'll literally take over the whole continent.
Well, that's the whole goal of the New World Order, is to destroy everybody's sense of a cultural, regional, historical identity, because people without a strong sense of themselves are easier to control. That's what they're doing.
They did it. They've already done it in England, Michael. 9 out of 10 babies born in London, England are called Mohammed. Check it out. 9 out of 10 babies that born in England, London, England are Mohammed. Paris, I think it's like 7 out of 10. It's unbelievable what's going on in Europe. And you got the Stasi Merkel, who's in control of Germany, and look at what's going into protests in Germany right now. It's off the chain.
Yeah, I saw the pictures of that. I saw the pictures of the protests in Germany. It's intense, and again, just like the recent protests in France about their economy, the American media isn't reporting on any of this. Okay?
And Michael, they're not teaching these. They're literally teaching the Muslim boys in Sweden and Norway, taking them to class, teaching them not how to rape blonde-haired Scandinavian women. They're literally taking these Muslim young males and taking them and put them in classrooms to show them, hey, rape is wrong. What does that tell you, Michael? What's going on in our world? It's insane. It's upside down.
It's an epic culture shock, and they created it artificially, and they don't know how to handle it. Tom, I got to let you go. We got one more caller. I'm going to try and fit in before the end of the show. So thank you very much, and we're going to switch over to Steve in Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, thank you. I was wondering the spraying, and I know they mentioned the Zika virus that's going on, especially I was thinking of Puerto Rico. Do you think that that's part of the population control that they have going on? That's just another aspect of it?
Well, I have no way of knowing at this time. We do know that there is a group of very rich, powerful people who have arrogated to themselves the right to decide that we need to reduce the human population. My problem with them is they want somebody else to die or go without children, never themselves. And that's why I cannot get behind them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. And just one other, if I could, I know that they're worried about the election being rigged. I guess, are there people who are going to be especially watchful of at least some aspects of the polling, or I should say the voting on election day?
We need to get people in there. We really do. Now, Steve, I'm going to let you go here. We're going to take a break for commercials, and I'm going to respond at length to this issue of voter fraud when we come back for the last segment of our program. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So let's talk about this problem with stolen elections. It is a reality. It has been for a very long time. We know that the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton were cheating during the primary season. There is no reason to assume they will not do the same in November. Every single American who values democracy, who values the Constitution, who values the American way of life we were all taught we were living, needs to get involved in two different ways. First, find any groups in your home states that are trying to file lawsuits to bar the certification of the Democratic vote where fraud was taking place. Force a recount. Make a big stink about it. Tell everybody you know there are reasons to think this election is not being honest, and that is just not acceptable. The other thing is we need to get involved with forming citizens groups to oversee the November election. And we already know that they're going to try and block people. They've cut back on the number of federal observers that are going to be monitoring this election. They want to do it in secret. They want to do it in private. And the other thing you ought to do is you ought to start lobbying your local elections board. Show them hacking democracy. These machines are not trustworthy. Get them to stop using the machines. Tell them that Europe has just banned them completely because they're wide open to fraud. And demand paper ballots and a hand count. We can't take this sitting down. If you refuse to get involved, you are part of the problem. And this is literally a fight for the future of our nation and indeed for the world itself. Because if that election is stolen in November, the government that follows will have no choice but to shut down freedom of speech, the right to keep and bear arms, because they're going to be a government that knows their population is aware the nation has been stolen. You need to get online and dig out all these stories about how drug money was flowing through HSBC and the links between HSBC and FBI Director Comey and Loretta Lynch, and you need to make them public all over your social media. We're seeing a lot of these big social media platforms like Facebook and Google are trying to downvote and hide these things. Twitter's trying to hide them, so use your direct email. You all have email books on your email server with all your friends. Just build mailing lists and send the stuff out person to person. That's what the samizdat did in the old Soviet Union. It was just fax machine to fax machine to fax machine, and ultimately they destroyed the credibility of the Soviet Union, the Politburo, and it came crashing down. And we need to take action. We've got less than 100 days to head off the theft of the United States of America by these money junkies, these war hawks, and these hereditary drug lords. This is as serious as it gets. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical. Go ahead, get angry. You're overdue. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.